This is Betty Traciak with a video tutorial for Splitcoaststampers for making a set of 5 cards using a method that I have called the stack and cut technique. This is a technique that I have used in my other hobby, which is quilting, and have adapted it for paper. What you need for this project are a set of scrapbook paper and cardstock. You'll need to cut 5 of each of these. From the scrapbook paper, cut those 3 3/4 by 5. The second layer is also cut 3 3/4 by 5. The accent layer is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8, and the card bases are 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2. The other things that you will need for this project are a heavy-duty trimmer that can cut at least 5 layers. If you do not have that, the other option that you can use is a rotary cutter, rotary mat, and ruler. You will also need some form of adhesive. It can be snail, tape, or sheet adhesive. To begin, take the 5 pieces of scrapbook paper and get those lined up and hold them firmly. Insert into the paper trimmer and cut off one of the corners. Then, making sure that those stay lined up in the order that they were, put those aside. Pick up the stack, again making sure that it is nested tightly together. Reinsert into the trimmer, slice, pick those up, and then orient those as they were. Pick it up again, make one more slice on this side, and then turn it one more time, lining those up, holding them tightly, putting it back in, and slicing. Then put those back in the order in which they were. Set the trimmer aside. Now, you can get these mixed up as you're cutting them, so just take a moment to make sure that you have these back in the proper orientation. I have these 2 mixed up, so I need to move this one down and this one up, and now I have them back into the orientation in which they were before they were cut. The next thing that you need to do is pick up 1 stack of papers and rotate 1 layer to the bottom. Pick up the second stack of papers and rotate 2 layers to the bottom. Pick up the third stack and rotate 3. The fourth pickup and rotate 4 layers. The 5th layer leave as it is. Then take the 5 pieces of paper that you have for the base and apply adhesive. And begin to assemble the cards. Take the top layer from each stack of cards and put those together. Now, when you're doing this, it is more important to bump up against the next one than it is to make sure that they are perfect around the edges, because that can be trimmed later. So as you're doing this, just bump up against the previous one and reassemble each of these into a quilt layer. Then take the next layer and apply adhesive again. And this time using the second layer. Actually, I usually like to start at the top. For some reason, it just helps me to start in this upper corner. And bump the next one up Again, I just am not paying too much attention to the outside, but making sure that the inner ones do bump up fairly tightly to each other. Continue in this manner until you have all 5 of these completed. The next step is to bring the trimmer back in and to trim up each of these uneven edges. So I just reinsert that into the trimmer and trim just a tiny little bit from each side. Here are the completed quilt pieces. Before you layer this on the cardstock layer and on the base, you would want to do any dry embossing or stamping at this time. Examples of things that I have done. This one has some dry embossing on it. For that, I used the Quilt Top embossing folder by Stampin' Up. On this one, I used a marker and did some hand stitching, zigzag and vertical and horizontal stitches along each of the edges. This one I chose to leave it as it is. And on this one, I also left it as it is, except that I also added some little corner embellishments. On this one, I used the Christmas Quilt stamp set by Stampin' Up, and this has a blanket stitch and a cross stitch stamp, and I used the blanket stitch here along the edge. I also did some heat embossing here, and this is an inlay which I did using the Quilt Builder framelits. One that I have done in the past is this one, which has lighter colors. If you have a background that is light such as this, you can stamp directly on it. Other things that I have done have been adding doilies and adding sequins and pearls and a wooden embellishment. So as you can see, there's lots of different ways that these can be decorated, and I hope you enjoy doing so.